Let's make a player that can shoot a bullet. So this will be a bit longer lesson probably because there is a lot of stuff that we have to cover, but let's get into it. So first let's create our player. Right click in the hierarchy and we have to create some empty game object. So we are clicking on create empty. Now as you can see, the default name for it is game object. I'll call it player. We want to see our player, and as was mentioned before, all the graphic images we're going to use for now will be called sprites. So in order to render this image, we have to add component called sprite renderer. Sprite renderer. And here in the sprite field, we're going to assign some image to our player. But there is no nice image in here, so let's just import something so we know how to do it. Before we do it, we have to download some nice image. Let's go to internet and maybe we're going to use a Pixabay website. I'll just log in quickly and just confirm that I'm not a robot. Go to Pixabay once more. You can of course just use some Google and download anything you like on the website for your own use. This is totally legal and there would be no problem at all. So let's just maybe type a player and we'll see what we can find. We can find nothing good really. So maybe I'll try something else, like maybe a wizard. Okay, we've got some wizard. And let's say which one we want to use to shoot some bullets. I think that I'm going to use... let me see. There's a Harry Potter. This one, no, I don't like it. The doggy, no. Or maybe I'll use this little pumpkin. Why not? Let's use a pumpkin. I will click free download, use some maybe lower resolution. We don't need a file that is that big. I will download it. And once it's downloaded, we have two ways of importing this file into our project. We can just drag and drop it like so, and it's already here. I will just delete it to show you the other way. The other way is right clicking in this project window and just click on import new asset. And here we have to find where was it downloaded, change the way it's being shown, Halloween, import, and here it is. So two ways of doing it. And if we are using a 2D project, you know, the template that we choose at the very beginning when we are creating this project, all the images that we are going to import, they will be converted to sprites automatically. So if you click on it and see it in this inspector window, we can see that texture type is sprite. So later on we'll look into how to change it and how to use it in some other purpose. But at the moment, there is nothing we have to do about it. Just leave it as it is. Okay, we've got the player. We've got the sprite renderer component on it. So now let's choose our sprite Halloween and here it is. Maybe we can just reset our transform. I move it to the left so that we can shoot to the right, for example. I save it. And in order to shoot some bullets, we have to create a bullet first. So let's do it. We have to create a new game object. Right click on it and create empty. Let's call it bullet. Our bullet needs to have some graphics as well so we can see what is being shot. So let's do the same thing that we did with our player. So we have to add a component called sprite renderer to render some image. And in this case, we're not going to import anything. You can, of course, if you want, no problem. I'll just use this knob. So we have a circular bullets. And we might to increase the size of it a bit. So I just use the scale and put 2 on those both axes. We can change the z-axis as well, but it doesn't matter because this is only a 2D project, so we can't see the depth. And I'll change the color, so maybe I'll choose some orange one, so it's a bit similar to our pumpkin. Okay, we've got it. And now we would need some script that we will attach to this bullet, so it will know that it has to move to the right. So let's do it. Add component and start typing. Maybe we call it bullet movement or bullet manager, however you want to call it. Just bullet will be fine as well. So I just leave it bullet and create an add. It was added, and if you click on it, you can see that the bullet script is attached to our bullet. Now let's open it. Once the bullet will be added to the scene, we want it to move to the right. So we've did it previously, and we have to do it once more with our bullet. So we have to change our transform position. Of course, in the future, we'll learn how to use forces and we'll try to do it in different way. But first, we have to get a basic understanding on how these vectors tree work and how to do it in the simplest way. And then we can progress and start doing it in a more complex way. For now, let's leave it as it is. So now we have to assign to it some vector that will allow us to move this bullet to the right. So as you remember, we are using new vector 3, and inside the parentheses we have to give the value for x, y and z positions. So we want to increase the x position, so we put like 2f for example, and we don't want to move the y and z, so just leave it on 0f. Semicolon at the end, and at the moment, if we just save it and leave it as it is, it will not do the thing we want it to do, because it will just keep putting our object on that location, but we want to increase it. So just have to add a plus in front of the assignment operator. And of course, because this is an update method, we need to use time delta time method so that it stay consistent on every computer, and we shall increase this value by some speed. But to use a speed, we can just put some value like that and it would be working totally fine. But the good practice is just to make a new variable of type float, call it speed, and assign some value to it straight away. So let's put it like 4f maybe. And instead of putting like fixed number, fixed value here, we will just add a variable in that place. So let's have a look if it's working. I just added this bullet to the scene and press play. So now it should shoot to the right, and it did. We want to instantiate this bullet whenever we click like left mouse button. So it shouldn't be on the scene yet. At the moment, we will learn how to instantiate it so that the bullet is not on the scene. Once we click on it, it will be visible on the scene. So let's make a prefab out of this bullet. What is a prefab? Prefab is a game object that consists of all the components and all of other objects that we need for it in order to work. So as you can see, we've added a sprite renderer component to it and the bullet component, and we made some changes in the bullet script. So now we are going to make a prefab out of it. So whenever we add it to the scene, it will be working straight away. Making a prefab out of this game object is really easy. We just have to drag and drop it to the project window. And now, as you can see, if we click on this bullet, it says Bullet Prefab, and our image is placed on the gray background. The other thing to see it clearly if it's a prefab or not, we can see that the bullet is highlighted in the blue font. It means that this is a prefab. Now, once we created this prefab, this exists in our project window. But be wary, this prefab consists of other objects like, this bullet script And this image that we added, this is an system image, so we don't have to worry about it. But if we use some external image that was imported to this project, we have to remember that we can't get rid of those objects that are used to build a prefab. Because if we delete them, for example, the prefab won't work. It has a reference to those objects. Let's delete it from the scene now, because we don't need it anymore. And let's go back to our player. We need to add a script to it so that it knows whenever it should instantiate or create this bullet on the scene. So let's add component, let's call it a player, maybe controller. Click enter, and after a while the player controller is added to our player. Double click on it to open it, and now we have to check in update method whenever the left mouse button is clicked. How to do it? We can use a conditional statement. So we'll get back to conditional statement later on. So now just see how it goes, and we will cover it at some point. We can just ask if left mouse button is clicked, then instantiate the bullet. So let's just write it. If left mouse button is clicked, so we have to take an input from the user. So just say input, and now we will use get button down. We could use get mouse button down as well, but I would not recommend it. Why? Because get button down is quite universal. If we use get button down, we will be able to use a pad or joystick as well at the same time. So this is a better option for us. So just use get button down. I pressed the arrow down to highlight, you see, the option that I want to use, like so. Now open the parentheses, and as you can see, it needs a string button name. So this is exactly the same as we used with get axis. So we have to provide an axis name for it. And if we open Unity and go to edit and open project settings, here we have our axis. And the another axis is fire 1, which is mouse 0 or left control. So we have to type fire 1 inside of this method. So let's go back and do quotes and type fire 1. And at the end we add the curly brackets, and inside we need to specify what should happen. So here we have to create a new game object. So just type game object and call it bullet. And now we have to assign to it something that we are going to instantiate. We want to instantiate this object, but we need to get some reference to this object. And how to do it? We need to create a public variable or the serialized variable. We have two ways of doing it. I will show you the way I think is a more appropriate or a better way of doing it. So here on the top, we'll create a global variable of type GameObject because it has to hold a reference to this GameObject, this prefab that sits in the project window. So let's call it a GameObject. It has to be with the capital letter, and let's call it a Bullet Prefab. So as you can see, when we create a variable, we start with the small letter, and then every other word that consists for the name of it, like prefab, it starts with the capital letter. So this is how we join the words together. We can't just make a space. It won't work. It's not a proper way of doing it. We have to do it in one string, like so. Okay, and now we created this variable, we defined it, but it won't be visible in Unity yet. We have to either make it a public, or there is a better way, we can just make it a serialized field in the square brackets. And thanks to this, let's go back. Maybe I will comment it out so we have no errors, because at the moment you can see we've got a red squiggly line under the assignment operator. Now you can see that in player controller we have a new field called Bullet Prefab. So this is that field that we created here. So let's go back, and as you can see, the Unity is giving us a tip that it expects us to add some game object to that field. And we know that we have to drag and drop this bullet in here. So the reference was made to that object. So let's go back to the script and comment it. And now we are creating this object on the scene and assigning it to this new variable. You might ask why we're doing it. It is quite necessary, and this is quite a standard of doing it, because later on we can just use this name to add some extra properties and values to our bullet that is being instantiated on the scene. So this is a way I would recommend you to do, at least for now, because this is quite of a standard. If you do it this way, you can just do it all the time and it will work fine. So now we need to instantiate this bullet prefab. So just write instantiate, of course auto completion working fine. This is a method, so we open a parenthesis, and now as you can see we need to specify 3 arguments. Of course there is plenty of more different ways of doing it, and as you can see it here, it's only one of 10 ways of instantiating it, and this is the simplest one, so I will show you how to do it. And we instantiate it. So first we have to add object original. So what are we going to instantiate? We want to instantiate this bullet prefab. So just type it bullet prefab and then give a colon, and as you can see the vector 3 position was highlighted. So now we have to specify where this bullet prefab needs to be instantiated. We can instantiate it in the place where our object is. So we can just call it a game object transform position. Game object with the small g. As you can see, this is a game object that this component is attached to. So we're just referencing this player object. And now we can add a colon, and here we need to specify a rotation of our bullet. We don't want it to rotate, so we just use something that we use most of the time when we don't want any other rotation. So just use quaternion and identity. This is just worth remembering because we will be using it like so all the time. So this should work now. So let's go back to Unity, and if we press play and just shoot, you can see that we can shoot many bullets and they just flying to the right, like so. The only problem is that all those bullets, even if they're not visible to us anymore, they are still in the game. As you can see here in the hierarchy window, they are still present and they occupy some memory for our game. And we don't want it. We want to get rid of those objects once we don't need them. And actually we don't need them once they out of our screen. Of course later on we will just shoot somebody and detect some collision and everything, but at the moment we don't know about those stuff yet. So we have to destroy those objects once we don't need it. So let's imagine when we should destroy them. If we should, so it takes about, I don't know, 3 seconds or 4 seconds so that they go outside the boundary of our camera. So after 4 seconds, or let's give a 5 seconds so we have some extra time. After 5 seconds, we would like to destroy them so they are not in the game anymore. How to do it? Let's go back to the script, and as you can see, that's why we are creating this new object and assign it to the bullet game object so that we can destroy it. So let's go at the end, and after we instantiate it, we can destroy it. So just call destroy, and here we can specify what we want to destroy. As you can see, there is an object obj that need to be destroyed, and float t, which is time after which it should be destroyed. So we want to destroy the bullet, and after 5 seconds. Now semicolon at the end, and let's have a look. Let's go back to Unity, press play, and let's instantiate few bullets and wait 5 seconds, and you can see that they are being deleted and get rid of our hierarchy window. So this is one way of doing it. The other way is we can destroy them from the Bullet Prefab itself, from that script. Let's see how it's being done. I will just delete this line of code, save it, and let's open this bullet script. Double click on it, and as you can see, this bullet script will be created once the Bullet Prefab is added to the scene. We can create this destroy method in our start method, and after 5 seconds we can just destroy it. So let's put destroy, and now we are not going to use a bullet because in this script there is no bullet variable anymore. So now we have to just reference the object that is attached to this script. And how do we do it? By saying GameObject with the small g. So just use GameObject, and after a colon we are using the time after which it should be destroyed, so 5f. And go outside of the parentheses, put semicolon, and that should have exactly the same effect. So let's play it, and if we shoot it, wait 5 seconds, and they should be disappearing from our list, and they are. So which way is better? It depends how you structure your code and your game. I personally prefer to do it in the bullet script because this is about the bullet, so I think it should be in the bullet script. But both ways are working fine, and it is totally up to you. So I hope you will know how to shoot bullets now, and later on, of course, we'll expand it so that we can detect some collisions with other objects on the scene.